Welcome. This is Miller. Today we're going to see how to eliminate or reduce sticking on your piston valves. We have 3 tubas in this house: Gronitz, Flagship or Luan Yu, and Melhart. On one of the tubas, I've noticed quite a bit of valve sticking. I would have to lubricate it very frequently. So let's take a look over here at this tuba. So let's take a look at this tuba here. We notice that this valve makes very little noise, but this valve, you can hear a little bit of spring noise, as if the spring is rubbing against something. That's what made me think that it may have something to do with the spring, why those valves were sticking. If you compare these two valves, this plate is flat. You see that? On this one, there's kind of like a washer there that centers the spring. And this is my theory why that flat plate, which I showed you here, may cause that valve to stick. This is an exaggeration, but you can see that if the spring always rides over to one side of the piston, that may tend to cock the piston slightly, which may cause it to stick or drag a little more easily. In fact, on this valve you can actually see where the spring has sat off center, right there. See it? And there's the spring showing that that's probably where that sat, off center. So what we're going to do is we're going to manufacture a washer that centers the spring on the piston. Just like this one was manufactured into the piston, we're going to create a washer like this that will center that spring on the piston. So here are the tools and materials that we're going to need for this project. We need a plastic tub, Dawn dishwashing detergent. Only Dawn will do. It's the best degreaser. Some epoxy putty. It doesn't have to be this brand name. There are many very good epoxy putties. A knife or two. Some small tools to work with the putty. A circle template, in this case, my wife's wedding band. Sharpie. Thin rubber gloves. An emery board, and we may need some super glue. So let's go. We put enough water in the plastic tub, warm water, to cover the valve, or the piston rather, when we put the piston in here to degrease it. Notice that there is a hole on the top end of the piston and another hole on the bottom end of the piston. We want to try to get as much oil off the entire piston, including on the inside, as we possibly can. So we'll get our Dawn mixed in for degreasing, and we will let the water enter into the piston like so. Wash it a little bit, Okay, now we've emptied out the wash water from inside the piston 2 or 3 times, and we've washed the piston 2 or 3 times. Now we're going to rinse it in just plain warm water, very similar to the way we washed it. Let all the air escape from the interior of the piston and drain it. Okay, now we've rinsed it 2 or 3 times. The washing and rinsing steps are very important to remove all traces of oil and water from and Dawn detergent from the piston, so that the epoxy will stick. Now we're going to use our circle template, which we have already determined is just slightly larger in diameter than the spring itself, to mark a circle in the center of the bottom plate of the piston. Like so. Get that template centered as best we can, and start drawing our circle. And again, now we're going to mix our epoxy and start applying it. I'm going to cut off about 1/8 of an inch here. That's really 3 or 4 times as much epoxy as we really need, but you're better off having more than not enough. We'll put that back together later and peel the wrapper off of our epoxy. And we just start to knead it, and we'll knead this 30 or 40 times to make sure that it's thoroughly mixed. Okay, so now we have kneaded our bit of epoxy 30 or 40 times. We're going to set that bit aside and hope that this is enough right here for our washer that we are going to fabricate out of epoxy putty. This putty hardens fairly quickly, so we don't want to, that's still too much. Remove a little bit more, and hardens fairly quickly, so we have to kind of work fairly quickly during this part of the operation. And we're going to put this in place and get some of our small tools to kind of work it around a little bit with. And sort of press it into place. Like so. Making pretty good progress here. This is my 3rd one, so I've had a little bit of experience doing this. Get our other tool to make sure we keep this vent hole open. Vent holes in the pistons allow them to move up and down without any compression from air. following our circle that we drew with our template. And now we're going to wait just a few minutes, and that brings us to our trimming step. Okay, now we've waited a few minutes, and we can tell by our, over here please, by our excess putty that it's hardening. So this is the stage where we want to use our X-Acto knife or box cutter or whatever it is we have to carefully trim our washer so that we don't have so much sanding to do at the sanding step. Shoot. Well, that was to be expected. So the washer has popped off of the piston, so we're going to trim it freehand here very carefully, and we may have to wait until it hardens a little bit more. Let's see about that. It's much easier to trim when it's attached to the piston, but I think we can. All right, let's get it back in position here, and make sure it's the right shape, using our spring itself to check the. I'm going to press that on there and hope that that we can resume our trimming process. Oh, that's good. It's just sticking just enough that we can trim it. And once this hardens, then we're going to attach it back onto the piston. Now we've managed to do a little more trimming, and we've made sure that we've pressed this half cured washer down onto the bottom plate of the piston very firmly so that it's nice and flat. Then we're going to let it cure completely. We're going to pop it back off, and we're going to re-secure it back onto the bottom plate of the piston using super glue. Okay, we're back. Yesterday we formed this washer and we trimmed it with our knife, and today it's hardened, so we can sand it down with this emery board right here. And once we've completed that, we'll go on to our next step. Okay, we're back, and we're just finishing up our sanding operation with our emery board on the fine side. And now we noticed that this washer did not pop off its piston as we expected it to, so it's been stuck on there. But thinking that it may pop off at some time in the future, we are going to put these little match marks on here so that if it does pop off, we can hopefully put it back on the bottom piston plate in the exact same position where it started. And now all we have to do is rinse this with some warm water, and we're ready to reassemble it into the tuba.